Adonai ma'adam b'teda'ehu. Adonai, what are we that you have regard for us? What are we that you are mindful of us? We are like a breath. Our days are like a passing shadow. We come and go like grass, which in the morning shoots up renewed, and in the evening fades and withers. You cause us to turn to dust, saying, Return, O mortal creatures. Would that we were wise, that we understood whither we are going, for when we die we carry nothing away. Our glory does not accompany us. Mark the wholehearted, and behold the upright. They shall have peace. For those of you for whom the 23rd Psalm is familiar, I invite you to join with me in its recitation. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He guideth me in straight paths for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou hast anointed my head with oil. My cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. When I die, remember me with a smile and laughter. If thoughts of me provoke no love, only sadness and tears, I ask that I be soon forgotten. Give what's left of me away to children and old ones who wait to die. And if you must cry, cry for your brother or sister who walks in grief beside you. And when you need me, put your arms around anyone and give them what you need to give to me. You can love me most by letting love live within the circle of your arms, embracing the frightened ones. Love doesn't die. People do. So when all that's left of me is love, give me away. My dear Sue, dear Todd and Sue, dear Sherry, Stephen and Teresa, dear Kathy and Kathy, dear family, friends. The very first thing Sue said to me when we spoke on Sunday evening in the aftermath of Marty's passing was that he had died just the way he and any of us would have wanted. At home, sitting in his favorite chair, watching a TV program he enjoyed, with the love of his life, Sue, nearby. Without panic, pain, or discomfort, without intervention or prolonged suffering, he breathed his last, quietly, gently. He just slipped away, as if, as our Torah describes the death of Moses, he had been kissed by God. Sue didn't even realize at first that he was gone, as nothing seemed amiss. In fact, while the moment of his passing was completely unexpected, after decades of health issues, beginning with his almost unheard of surgery to do 7 bypasses at the age of 58, Sue knew that after his last round in the hospital, her 91-year-old husband, who seemingly beat everything from non-Hodgkin's lymphoma to late-onset diabetes to bladder cancer, was slowing down. Sue felt both lucky and comforted that he went peacefully. The second thing Sue told me was that everyone loved Marty. He was easy to love. He was kind and sensitive, warm and welcoming, outgoing and engaging. He seemed to embrace the world with interest and enthusiasm. The third thing Sue told me was how much he loved art and how artistic he was. I subsequently learned how much and in how many ways artistry informed his life. Marty loved art. He loved to create, design, envision. He loved to engage in his own artistic endeavors, whether through the classes he took as a teenager at the Cleveland Institute of Art, where, among other things, he learned pottery and enameling, the art history he loved, the jewelry he sold, the fashion he appreciated on himself and others, the museums he adored and never tired of taking his children and then grandchildren to every one of them, the buildings, over and over again, I might add, the buildings, spaces, and landscapes he appreciated, even the food he enjoyed. All of his greatest pleasures and interests were related in some way to his love of art. In thinking about all that Sue and his family said about him, and that you will hear reflected by family representatives in just a few moments, it occurred to me that this was a man who not only enjoyed, appreciated, and wore art, who loved, understood, and craved artistic expression. Marty Cahen was a man who, in his work, in his relationships, in his values and character, was an artist of life. The contours of his 91-year journey were not all smooth and graceful. The colors of his palette were not all bright and pleasing, but his intention was always to be the best and do the best that he could, to pursue goodness and positive accomplishment, to support, encourage, and empower others, to expand and enjoy the world with his loved ones, and to always bring a bit of style and panache into every possible moment. He was an artist of life. His earliest years, growing up in the largely immigrant, upwardly mobile, working-class neighborhood of Kinsman, would not have predicted his future devotion to art or his OG style. Marty was the eldest of Polish immigrants to this country, Rose and Theodore Cahen. Eugene was the middle child, and George was the youngest. Even as a young child and then student at John Adams High School, Marty loved art and artistic endeavors, but he had to stop his artistic pursuits when his father passed away at the tragic age of 49, leaving his wife Rose, a widow, with 3 boys to support. It was very clear to Marty that she could not do it alone. He finished high school and went to work full-time. With his love of beauty and design, he gravitated to downtown Cleveland, where the jewelry shops and department stores were. He ended up quite fortuitously at Saul Bergman Jewelers, where he was able to design many beautiful pieces. An outstanding salesperson that he was, he worked his way up to becoming general manager of the business for many years. Both he and Saul Bergman Jewelers thrived under his leadership. He loved his work and worked very hard 6 days a week. Loved the merchandise he carried, loved his customers, colleagues, and the artists that they featured. As good as the merchandise was, Marty understood that the real business of the store was through relationships, and he was a master at establishing connections with anyone and everyone who ever crossed his path. He naturally loved people, loved to talk with them, to learn their stories, to be of help and offer advice. He had the gift of gab, but always with the goal of getting to know a person better. And people felt it. As Sue attested, everyone loved him. He was an artist of life. As you will hear more than once, his artistry extended to his love of fashion, especially for himself. As one of his family said, he should have lived 100 years earlier, as his refinement of taste in music, dress, theater, deportment belonged to the last century, not to this one. Whenever he and Sue went out, Sue always chuckled at how the women would fawn all over him. Impeccably dressed, groomed, and handsome man that he was. She was totally ignored, but that was fine with Sue. She knew what an impressive figure he was in any context. Marty was equally passionate about fine dining. He remembered the place, the decor, the ambiance, the menu, and the waitstaff at every restaurant where he had enjoyed a good meal. He was also a consumer of ice cream. He loved to take the whole Brady bunch of kids to La Puma's, where he would buy 5 gallons of lemon ice for them all to share, and for Marty especially to enjoy most of all, dipping his cookies into it. East Coast custard with maraschino cherries remained one of his all-time favorites. He loved cars, which meant he loved auto shows, the Crawford Auto Museum, and shopping for cars, whether for himself or others. He loved Judaism and was a long time devoted member of our congregation, with a brief hiatus at Temple Emmanuel, where Kathy celebrated becoming a bat mitzvah. Marty was raised in an Orthodox household, but loved his affiliation with Anshe Chesed congregation, even as a teenager. He would study with Rabbi Nissenbaum from time to time when he came to the house, but it was hard to carve out the time to do so on a consistent basis. He loved to watch basketball, which was the only sport he really cared for. He enjoyed watching the antique road shows and following art auctions. He and Sue were proud of Playhouse Square, went to the movies. Marty loved the orchestra, and they both enjoyed taking the kids to as much theater as possible. He was an artist of life. Even in his preoccupation with work, it was never a job. It was always his passion, his craft, his creative outlet, and the beneficiary of his never fully realized talent. After Bergman's closed, Marty worked for another 15 years in sales, which included selling fur coats, but eventually found him at the final professional engagement of his career when he volunteered at the cancer shop. He brought his sense of style, design, and fashion with his sales ability to help the shop raise funds for cancer research and treatment. He also volunteered at Hillcrest Hospital. He was an emissary to the patients, someone they could talk to, who understood what they were facing, who could listen and empathize, who could validate their fears and anxieties, and ultimately help them feel ready, empowered, supported, seen, and heard. It was something Marty did over and over again. He reached out to others with his great personal warmth and magnetism, with his kindness and compassion, his sensitivity and thoughtfulness, his wisdom, guidance, and sound advice, and he made a difference. He was an artist of life, whose impact is enduring, particularly on his loved ones. One is only to hear the words of grandson Jared to glimpse a small hint of the great influence he has had and will continue to have on all who knew him. Jared wrote, these are his words. Hello, everyone. I'd like to thank you for being here today. It truly means a lot and shows how many people also loved my Papa Marty. I thought for a long time about what I was going to say, but as it's impossible to summarize and memorialize somebody's life in just a few sentences, I just want to say thank you. Thank you for all those trips to the car museum and those many no-destination rides through Amish country, except, of course, always stopping in Burton for maple candies. Thank you for all those ice cream cones from East Coast Custard. Papa loved to eat everything his doctors advised against eating. Thank you for your endless fashion knowledge, as I will always know the difference between a wingtip and a cap toe, the best way to fold a pocket square, and when to tie a half Windsor or a 4 in hand. Thank you for the many wonderful meals together at Jack's, waltzing in arm, like you owned the place, right over to Carmen's section to discuss the state of the world over a bowl of cabbage borscht. Thank you for those countless conversations, your hilarious commentary, your wonderful stories, and your spot-on advice. But most importantly, thank you for your unconditional love and admiration, and for being the best grandpa a person could ask for. I am going to miss our regular phone calls and long visits, but I am so grateful for the 33 years that I had you in my life. I love you, and I find comfort and peace knowing that you are finally reunited with Teddy and Rose, George and Eugene, Farley and Michael. He was, in many ways, a survivor who turned adversity into artistry. His marriage to Linda Lewendorf brought the 3 great gifts of their life together into this world. Todd, who is now married to Sue Crone, Sherry Gold, who is now the mother of Jared and Jillian, whose wedding to Tom Noel Marty and Sue joyously attended just a few months ago, and who are currently on their delayed honeymoon, which Marty would only want them to continue. And Farley, Zichrono Livracha, whose widow, Cassie, is here with their 2 children, Oliver and Benjamin. As married couples, Marty and Linda were friendly with Sue and Arthur Zweig, so that when both found themselves divorced, Marty would come by on Sundays with Todd, Sherry, and Farley to pick up the Zweig kids, Stephen, Michael, and Kathy. What began as outings with the kids, as both parents were dating other people, eventually became a courtship with the kids. When they finally had a few minutes alone on a trip to Mexico, they decided to try living together for a year. On December 26th, 1976, they married, and both of them immediately doubled the size of their families. Their merger had its many challenges, but as you will continue to hear, it had abundant joys as the family grew and expanded. Stephen married Teresa and had Derek, who, with Lindsay, brought Vivian into the family and now is engaged to Jackie, and are the grateful parents of Lane. And Justin is married to Shelby. Michael, Zichrono Livracha, married Kathy and brought Jacob, now with Nicole, Olivia, Alexa, and Ava into the family. And Kathy, with Jack Corey, brought the twins, Mackenzie and Nicole, into this ever-expanding, loving clan. It is the greatest tribute any of us could wish for that all of Marty's surviving children and almost all of his grandchildren are here in tribute to him. The grandchildren who are not here literally could not be here. There were no hyphenated relationships in Marty's world. No exes, steps, in-laws. When he married Sue, her family became his family, and his family became hers. He was an artist of life. In all of his creations, in all of his designs, the focus of his artistry, the anchoring center of his life's composition for the last far too short 49 years was Sue. He adored her. He loved to talk to her. He supported every political cause in which she was involved, even though he was not a political activist. They traveled the world together and found worlds in each other. They walked hand in hand as partners, lovers, teammates, and friends because of the great love, respect, and admiration they had for each other. No one will ever be able to comprehend how Sue and Marty could sustain the loss of Michael, and the day after his funeral learned that Farley was diagnosed with metastatic colon cancer, from which he passed away 6 months later. We watched in horror the unspeakable tragedies and in awe at their strength of will and purpose as they focused on their families, especially being there for Michael's children and for Oliver and Benjamin. Marty knew what it meant to lose one's father at a far too young age. And yet, he also knew that even the darkest colors, the roughest edges, the ugliest materials can be molded, blended, reshaped, and incorporated as part of the building blocks of our lives. May we always be inspired by the image of him to make of our lives multi-layered, multicolored, and multifaceted compositions of beauty, meaning, and positive impact. And let us say, Amen. Zichrono livracha. May his memory rest as a blessing upon each of us. It is a fearful thing to love what death can touch. A fearful thing to love, hope, dream, to be. To be and oh, to lose a thing for fools this, and a holy thing to love. For your life has lived in me, your laugh once lifted me, your word was gift to me. To remember this brings painful joy. 'Tis a human thing, love, a holy thing, to love what death has touched. I call now on family members, son Stephen, grandchildren Derek and Oliver, to offer their thoughts and memories.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for all being here to honor and celebrate the life of a remarkable man. This past Sunday started like any typical day for Marty. He got up, took Coco out, fed her, got a bite to eat, chit-chatted with my mom, got dressed, put on one of his many suits, walked into the TV room, sat in his favorite chair, turned on the television to something of interest, and slipped away. 91 years. That's how it ended. I'd call that a gentleman's death. And as we all know, Marty was the ultimate gentleman. How do you eulogize a man who lived 91 years? I'd like to try by telling some of Marty's story. Marty grew up on Cleveland's east side, graduating from John Adams High in 1951. And just after graduation, his father died. Marty was 17. Marty's father, Theodore, was a jewelry wholesaler who dreamed of having his own retail store one day. And at the time, Marty, wanting to follow in his father's footsteps, had a job at the jewelry store himself, paying $15 a week. Later, Marty moved on to another jeweler who had previously reached out, paying $100 a week, of which $50 went to his mom, Rose. Marty's next move was to Saul Bergman Jewelers, 4th and Prospect downtown. I can still hear those commercials ringing in my head from the 1970s. And from there, most of you know the rest of the story. Marty would continue at Saul Bergman's for years, fulfilling his dad's dream by later gaining an equity position in the business and then leaving to open a new venture of his own. Marty's love for jewelry, the jewelry business, rubbed off on Todd and Farley, who both blazed their own paths in the industry. Marty would later go on to a career in consulting that took him to stops across the country. He did a stint in Seattle, where I used to connect with him when I was living in Oregon and working the Seattle market for my job. And as the consulting wound down, he semi-retired to some volunteer work until he fully retired around 83, 84. And I don't mean 1983, 84. I mean when Marty was 83, 84. Now that's loving what you do. The jewelry business meant everything to Marty. He bought from estates, he sold, he designed, he consulted. Everyone in the Cleveland area knew Martin Cahen, a state jeweler. But as much as Marty loved the jewelry business, nothing meant more to him than family. And nothing meant more to his family than Marty. When you're around over 90 years, yes, you're a husband, a father, a grandfather, but you take on sort of a legendary status in the family. And that's what Marty was to the people who loved him, a legend. And he looked the part, just like the black and white old-time movies he loved to watch, the impeccably tailored suit and tie, the vintage fedora hat and trench coat, the finest leather shoes, his gray hair, thick black rimmed glasses, whether dining at a fine restaurant, visiting with friends and family, or lounging at the beach. That was Marty's look. And if Marty didn't make a career selling jewelry, he would have been a great suit salesman. He loved nothing more than bargain hunting for fine suits that would retail for over $1,000 and buy them for less than $100. Open his bedroom closet and it looked like a suit wholesaler organized by color and year of purchase. And if he wasn't buying suits for himself, he loved to take his kids to clothing stores to teach them how to buy just the right look. All of our first suits were bought with Marty at his favorite store, meeting his tailor, and all the accessories, 3-piece with a vest and pocket square. There's a family picture that has floated around from Farley's bar mitzvah. The suits that Farley, Michael, Todd, me are wearing were all part of a Marty suit shopping experience. And although it's debatable, Marty did have hobbies that we all grew to love over the years. Suit shopping was just one of many. There was apple picking, Amish country, visiting maple syrup farms and ice cream shops, mystery shopping competitive jewelers to see if they knew what they were talking about, and he loved cars and car shows. And I remember a couple of cool ones he had, a 1975 or 76 Buick Riviera, and a 1979 or so Monte Carlo, a couple of classics 50 years later. Marty had a gentle exterior, but he was a strong man. Rising up from losing a father as a teenager and looking after his younger brothers and mother, every disease you can think of starting in his mid-50s, business challenges, personal life challenges, life has thrown everything imaginable at this man that would bring most to their knees. But he never quit. He never changed who he was. He never stopped loving and caring for the people around him. He never stopped living. Marty was a man made of faith, of family, of perseverance and responsibility, and he never wavered once on any of those. Michael, Kathy, and I first knew Marty as our stepfather. And although he wasn't our father by birth, he became one by choice, along with Todd, Sherry, and Farley. And as the years rolled on, was simply Papa Marty. And it was in his grandchildren that he took his greatest delight, a well-deserved dividend earned from a life of love with Jared, Jillian, Oliver, Benny, Derek, Justin, Jacob, Olivia, Alexa, Mackenzie, Nick, and Ava. And to top it off, 2 great-grandchildren, Vivian and Lane. And for my mom, Marty was a 50-year life partner. They found each other coming off of difficult times and tried to rebuild their lives and provide some stability for themselves and their families. The path wasn't always an easy one, but they remained committed to each other, cherishing what was most important to them both, their family. Family was their bond to each other. It drove them and it is what made them most happy, sharing those special moments together with the ones they loved. There's no doubt that their relationship added decades to Marty's life. Outside of good genetics, maybe, I don't know how else to explain Marty's longevity, outside of not wanting to leave my mom. And my mom's tireless efforts to ensure Marty had the best medical care and help keep him to a fulfilling schedule every day. It was really something to witness, but she didn't want to let him go. So we say goodbye to a gentleman who we are surely better for having in our lives. Marty, well done. You will be missed. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name's Derek. I'm Papa's oldest grandson. Keep this quick, but my earliest memories of Papa Marty were, and we're talking maybe when I was 4 or 5 years old, was that of somewhat fear and concern, because every time I saw him, he would call me monkey and squeeze my knuckles hard enough to produce long-term arthritis. I don't know where he got this greeting for children, but it was definitely a staple of seeing Papa. In fact, I've been calling my newborn son Monkey for 7 weeks now, and I only realized when I was writing this likely where that came from. Just one of the many ways that Papa Marty influenced me without me even realizing it. I think of many things when I think of my Papa. I think of his dapper outfits. The man was best dressed in every room he walked into, a trendsetter, one might say. In fact, I had wanted to, when I got here, tie a double Windsor in honor of him, but I also realized that there was only one person in my life who could tie a double Windsor on the spot, and that was him. So no luck there. My dad mentioned the fedoras. Oliver, Ben, and Jared, you definitely have first dibs on all fedoras. I could not imagine what I would look like in one of those. I think of his obscure taste in ice cream flavors. I can't tell you how many times I was disappointed as a preteen raiding Grandma and Papa's fridge only to find cherry raisin or peach orange or some other outrageous fruit combination ice cream. I think of his intelligence and the many discussions I had about current events with both Grandma and Papa. They have a lot of grandkids, but they still make each of us feel like we're the most important. Most of all, and I think we can all agree, I think of how Papa Marty was a rock. Every family needs a rock. Men and women of consistency who represent a fixed point for everyone else. When our lives get crazy, it's always helpful to look to stability. We all know the stability Papa brought to our family. He's a great role model, and I'm lucky to have had him in my life. Love you, Papa.
Sorry, everybody. Hi, everyone. My name is Oliver Cahen, and I want to tell you all about my Papi Mushy. He was my grandpa, and he was very special to me. Papi was a good listener. He always cared about what I had to say, even when it was silly. He gave me advice how important it is to be a good and giving person. He told me being kind matters more than anything. Every time we visit visited Poppy, we would go to Jack's Deli together. We made so many memories there with my daddy and Poppy. Poppy would tell stories about growing up in Cleveland and about being a jeweler. My dad always made funny comments that would make Poppy laugh so hard. Those times make me really happy. Poppy was also a great dresser in the world. He always wore the nicest suits and had the cleanest shoes. And he had the fanciest hats. My little brother Benny loved to put Poppy's jacket and hat and walk with his cane pretending he was Poppy. It was so funny to watch. I think I love dressing because of Poppy. I love dressing up because of Poppy. He always told me I look sharp. He would say, if you dress the part, then you feel the part. And he was always right. Before my daddy passed away, he and Poppy would FaceTime every single day, sometimes even twice a day. I would sit in my daddy's office and listen to them talk for hours and hours. I didn't always understand everything, but I loved hearing their voices together. After my daddy passed, me and Benny always started FaceTiming with Poppy. He always started to call me saying, "There they are, Big Mouse and Little Mouse." He would tell us all about Coco, the weather in Cleveland, and what Grandma Sue was doing. I always told Poppy jokes. He laughed even when they weren't very good. One of my favorite times with Poppy was when we went to the Moltz Museum to see the Rube Goldberg exhibit. While my parents were busy talking, Benny and I pushed Poppy in his wheelchair to go explore. We got a little lost, but Poppy just laughed the whole time. He didn't care that we got in trouble. He just loved being with us. He had the biggest smile watching us play with all the machines. My parents weren't too happy about it, but Poppy thought it was the best. Last July, when we were in town to celebrate his 91st birthday, we went to Amish country. It was my first time there, and Poppy told me all about the Amish. We went to his favorite cheese store. He also introduced me into Olipop soda. He was so happy that day. Now, every time I drink an Olipop, I will always remember Poppy and that special trip. I'll always remember dancing at Justin's wedding, enjoying ice cream with us at Mitchell's, going to all the museums in Cleveland, sneaking more desserts without Grandma Sue seeing, telling me all about gemstones, and giving me the biggest hugs. Poppy, you were kind and loving. You made me and Benny feel special every time we were with you. Now you're in heaven with my dad and Uncle Michael. I know you three are together again, laughing and telling stories. I love you, Poppy Moishi, and I'll never forget you.
Thank you for those beautiful, evocative, courageous tributes to a very special man. And Oliver, I would just say to you, I remember your father at his bar mitzvah. And as proud as everyone is here today of you, I think he would be even prouder. Thank you. Oh God, You give us loved ones and make them the strength of our life, the light of our eyes. They depart and leave us bereft on a lonely way. But you are the living fountain from which our healing flows. To you the stricken look for comfort and the sorrow-laden for consolation. O God, we see life as through windows that open on eternity. We see that love endures and the soul endures, as you, O God, endure forever. We see that the years are more than grass that withers, more than flowers that fade. They weave a timeless pattern in a world that is the dwelling place of your love and glory. Please rise.
מלא רחמים שוכן במרומים המצא מנוחה נכונה תחת כנפי השכינה עם קדושים וטהורים כזוהר רקיע מזהירים את נשמת משה בן דבו ורבקה שהלך לעולמו בעל הרחמים יסתירהו בסתר כנפיו לעולמים ויסרו חיים את נשמתו אדוני הוא נחלתו וינוח בשלום על משכבו ונאמר Amen.
Compassionate God, eternal Spirit of the universe, grant perfect rest in your sheltering presence to Martin Cahen, who has entered eternity. O God of mercy, let him find refuge in your eternal presence, and let his soul be bound up in the bond of everlasting life. God is his inheritance. May he rest in peace. And let us say, Amen.